What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning into the Joe and Friends Show, episode 2. I'm very excited. Today we have John Wills joining us. He's the field CTO at Alation. John is a very fascinating person to talk to. I feel like I could talk to him for hours. Thankfully, for the purpose of this video, or this episode today, we'll spare you the multi-hour talk and we'll keep it to an hour. But how's it going, John?
Yeah, it's going great, Joseph. Expectations low, right? That's the key, right? You set the bar so high. We'll see what happens, but hopefully the audience finds it interesting.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I mean, you work at Alation right now. They do data governance. I mean, for people who don't know what that is, what is data governance?
It's a great question, right? To start off with that one, just give us some context. There is all kinds of definitions floating around, but I would just say it's the disciplined management of data throughout its life cycle. Now that's a pretty broad term, so let me break that down a little bit. So discipline meaning there's a process, a thought process, and procedure and tasks to the management of data over its life cycle. So from its creation to its retirement or its archival. So breaking that down even a little further, so that means, what does it mean, proper process management? Well, it means having policies and standards for things like how people should use the data, what kind of access they should have, how it should be masked and made sensitive, if it's going to be shared across different regions or different organizations and so forth. So so governance is this proper management of data throughout its life cycle. It's a big umbrella which includes those things, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but there's kind of a compliance driver for it, right? And there's also a business transformational and a digital transformational driver, that we see within our customer base.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, data governance is one of those topics where I feel like it's it could have possibly such ubiquity that I sometimes have a hard time understanding where it starts and where it ends.
Yeah, well, hence I'm gainfully employed, right? So, no, it does. It's slippery, and I've thought about that a lot. And why is it so? Why is it so hard to for people to get their arms around? I think it has a lot to do with we've all known that data should be managed properly for decades and decades, right? So that's not that's nothing new. That once meant largely within the four walls of the data center, and then data management, and then IT people, and so it was a relatively narrow group of people with. Right, back in the day, right, the data volumes compared to today were fairly minuscule, and their rate of change was relatively low. But that's all changed. Right now, everyone is a data consumer and a producer for the most part. Now I say everyone, not every single employee in every single business function, but to a much higher percentage. And so it's out of the four walls of what it used to be, and we have all this volume, we have all this variety of data, we have all these platforms. And so back in the day, governance was this mystical thing that these people in the four walls did, and they had policies and they followed those. And I think that made it difficult for everyone outside of that to understand. And so I don't think it's the definition of what it is quite caught up with the expansion of data and the use of data. And so I think it's still a slippery issue today. I have one other thought on that too, which is the reason it's so slippery is governance is, like everything, right, that's in the tech world and industry, it's people, process, it's technology. It's largely a process-driven activity. I know, I work for Alation. We have a great catalog, and we believe in sort of what we call active data governance and catalog-driven governance, and maybe we'll get into that. But truth be told, governance is sort of 70-80% a process in people and process. And so, maybe it doesn't get the shiny penny sort of attention that other, sort of like, the self-service BI tools, reports, analytics, modeling tools get. So anyway, I could go on and on about why it's this slippery topic. I guess I will go on and on for one more,
no, you should.
one more point.
I'm kind of wondering, like, yeah, go for it.
Well, I think for a long time, I think people can relate to this. Governance was you go get some training once a year, and you listen to the video, you take the quiz for your your corporate standards that you answer 6 out of 7 questions correct, so you passed, and you're certified that you looked at the policies and you understand the policies and you got that seal of approval. But now you go back to your daily life, now you go back to your job, and so that usage and access policy, that security policy, right, where data is kind of related to all that, it's Scout's honor. Like every day as you're working with your Excel spreadsheets and you're pulling data out of your various databases and you're running BI reports, it's Scout's honor. Like, just remember that when this thing occurs, you're supposed to remember that you read this thing, that you took, answered 7 questions on a quiz, that I'm going to do the right thing. And so my point is that governance was this detached strategic thing from everybody's daily lives. And I think what's happening now in the industry is we're starting to see that change. We're starting to see where governance is now being applied, to our daily activities, especially when we talk about privacy and things like that, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're kind of making it sound like data governance is the equivalent of like the HR department for data, then. So, or at least that's how it was kind of, I think, described in the old days. Like you check the boxes because you had to keep your job, basically, right? But
I think on the compliance side, there's definitely. That's always been true, right? I mean, especially coming off the 2008-2009 financial crisis and all the regulation that hit, there was a huge tailwind around governance, but the tailwind was thou shalt, check all the boxes that we are, and we can prove to an auditor that we are following standard, best practice, disciplined approach to managing our data. And so it was all about compliance. It was all about audit. Very little with that tailwind was about transforming the business, growing a data culture, supplying better, higher quality data with more trust and confidence to, a set of consumers. And I'd say largely as we've gotten further and further away from the 2008-2009 event, it's increasingly become about the latter. It's still about the former. You have to satisfy both.
Right.
But it's not so much about just the compliance and, sort of the enforcement department. It's about the business growth, and trying to make data an accelerator as well. So I think it's it's kind of got a balance in those drivers now. So my other comment when you say about HR, like one thing I challenge people on all the time is to think about when you say data is an asset, extend that thought, right? So if you think about a physical asset in your enterprise, what do you do with a physical asset? Most physical assets that are, more than nominal value, you get an asset tag, they're tracked in an asset management system. What do you do with the dollars that through your business? Well, there's a standard of accounting, there's a chart of accounts, there's people that manage that to a standard and with well-defined process. My challenge is to think about governance as another business process. If data is the asset, then you need a process to manage it. And that's essentially, I guess in a shorter definition I gave earlier, right? That would be what governance is. It's the process to manage the data like an asset.
That's a really good point. It's also interesting too, how often I keep seeing supply chain or manufacturing sort of analogies applied back to data. When you're talking about data ops, I mean, that's essentially just like lean thinking applied to data. DevOps really, and that's actually a really good point. I hadn't really thought of it in that way, where you're kind of tagging assets like you would your stockroom. So,
well, if it's an asset, we have to treat it like an asset, and I think that's been a problem, over the past few decades. I mean, obviously, the whole data world, as the tech world, is as an engineered discipline, is less mature than some of these other functions in businesses that have been around for, at least 100 years plus. as discipline. So, I know a lot of people may disagree with that. If you think, well, we've been doing, this stuff for at least several decades. That's true, but still, in compared to other disciplines like accounting, right, we're still have a long way to go in terms of maturity. So back to governance, I just don't think we certainly haven't made it a core part of the business process. In other words, I think the holy grail and what everyone wants is, just like if you're purchasing something, you're going through your procurement department, you just want to know that the dollars and cents are being managed in a way that's correct. Most people want to do the right thing, right? So you just want to know it's correct. You don't necessarily want to, if you're someone, right, in a marketing department, you don't need to go check to see if they did the double entry accounting correctly and follow the traces. And I'm sort of relating that to lineage for those familiar with this concept of lineage and governance, right? You don't really want to go do that because it's really not really your job to trace that. What you want to know is that there's a discipline and a standard that's being followed. It's kind of like you walk through your house, you flip the light switch on. You just want to know the electricity's there. Governance is one of those processes. You want to know and understand that you're not gonna flip the switch and it's gonna arc and burn your house down, right? It's high quality data. You can have confidence in it. There's a set of people that are managing it. A set of things that are keeping it clean, keeping it high quality. And part of high quality is an important part of governance is that it's well described, right? Mm-hmm. And so now this kind of cuts back to the role of the catalog in governance, because the catalog helps you basically build a fabric across your entire data estate, your whole landscape of data, whether that's multiple data lakes, enterprise data warehouses that may be legacy, many different data marts, maybe just file stores, right? We all have this explosion of stuff. We're not putting the genie back in the bottle. There's never be a consolidated mainframe or enterprise data warehouse again. So, I think my message is, we just have to get used to it. Our answer is put a fabric on top of it, which understands all that stuff and describes it really well and keeps the description at a super high level. In other words, and that's part of governance, because you don't want to go to your data, right? When you're trying to find the best data to use about customer, you don't want to find 15 different definitions that diverge so greatly that you don't know what customer means, right? And that may sound ludicrous, but that's actually a common.
Mm-hmm. I've seen this before.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess I'll stop there for the moment, because it's the description and the metadata of your data and the data that both have to maintain a high quality.
You brought up accounting a bit. Do you ever think there will be something similar to GAAP, like generally accepted accounting principles for data?
That's a great question. The truth is that there's more regulations out there than my arm is long, right? Everybody just throws around GDPR and CCPA and but there's so many data standards. TOGAF has one, and the DAMA has their own, and NIST from the federal government. There's just a very long list. So that's a great question. When I think about that question, one of the key things in my mind is, will there ever be a consolidation and agreement on something that people follow, right? I forget the name of the accounting standard that's largely in the UK and in Europe, but I know it's different than GAAP standards here. But we need people to coalesce, and even these standards, which you could think of as being kind of siloed standards, they all have a lot of overlap, but they need to be coalesced or consolidated into something that is more unified. So right now, what people are doing is kind of picking, they're reading through these and they're kind of picking the flavor that best fits their organization, and then they're tweaking it. And that's a good thing for now, because it's really all you can do. But so I don't know, maybe I'm not giving you a very defined answer, but maybe one day there will be U.S. government or someone will have enough authority to push through a single standard that people will then start to follow. But I don't see it anytime soon, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, who's a guy here in the comments in LinkedIn? Hey, what's up, guy? Says accounting is within a well-defined box, which makes it somewhat simpler. Granted, the medical profession was able to define their standards with HIPAA. So yeah, tend to agree. Every data set seems different, but again, I don't think that should mean that we just sort of ignore certain baseline standards for quality or for governance, right? And I don't think that also implies that the only way you should be doing governance is by basically trying to check boxes that you're complying with certain governmental regulations. I think that, I mean, you brought up data culture before, right? And so as companies develop a data culture, which is also a loosely defined term, you know, I would just think that there would be certain baseline standards even within an organization for how you would handle data and so forth. But
yeah, I mean, most of our customers that are succeeding with governance, and I say that specifically because for the past 10 years, in what I call kind of a governance 1.0 approach, there was lots and lots of failures. And I think the good news is I think the industry's learned a lot from those, and so be happy to talk about that in a minute. But I think the customers that are succeeding, what they do is they take the standards, usually multiple. They create their own set of policy statements. These are still relatively high-level policy statements about how they will, manage data throughout its life cycle, like I said in the beginning. And then they create a set of standards off of those policies, which are, really get closer to the actionable things that they do on a daily basis to make those policies be true. And then they assign roles to those standards, right, in order to adhere to those standards. So, that's kind of the mechanics of how you get from, really only legally interpreted standards into actionable, work that happens on a daily basis and things you can measure.
Right.
And by the way, on those legal standards, many of them are written so loosely, including, in my opinion, GDPR, CCPA, that most organizations do have to have their legal team review and weigh in on, well, what do these mean for us as an organization from a risk perspective, and therefore how should we apply them? I'm not saying the attorneys, the general counsel get final say in that, but there has to be interpretation that everyone in the org, agrees to, in order to write those policies, have those standards, and then execute. Of course, that's all we're still talking about heavily on the compliance side.
Right, makes a lot of sense. It's kind of switching gears a bit. I mean, you've used this term data catalog. I'm wagering that a lot of the audience may have heard of the data catalogs, but may not know what data catalog is supposed to do. Can you help them out?
Yeah, absolutely. I would wager that a good portion, maybe not all, but a good portion of the audience, when I say data catalog, thinks, depends what age you are. If you're over a certain age, you're going to think data dictionary. And you're going to think, oh, okay, well, it's this. I know what that is. It's a list of tables and column names with a data type and a length, and yeah, great. And maybe a little terse description. So a catalog is way more than that, right? A catalog is yes, you do hold the technical metadata about all of your data sources. That's true. So you have those things I described. But you also have many other types of assets. So you have BI reports, workbooks, dashboards. You have business metric definitions. You have business terminology. You have business functional descriptions. You have, if you're doing a lot of models, data science models, you have models there. You have representation of pipelines that you're building to move data from point A to point B. So you have this rich set of assets that are all interrelated in this web of information. And for all of those, you have an additional, what we call logical set of metadata or curated metadata. So you have, say, let's go back to the thing we all know, which is tables, columns, right? So for the technical column name, you have a business name that, business person kind of makes sense out of it. And then you have it described well, and you have that for everything, full descriptions. And then getting into the governance world, beyond just simple cataloging the way I've described, you have a rich set of governance related metadata, logical metadata, like classifiers, and statuses and expirations for things that need to be rechecked on a recurring basis. Maybe privacy links to an asset type known as a privacy impact assessment or a data sharing agreement, all these things that support these governance standards that I was, alluding to a few minutes ago. So catalog is a really rich set of assets with a rich set of metadata, both technical and logical or business oriented. And okay, so what's the purpose of the catalog? Well, our view of the world is that, if you think of a dashed line, and above the line you have a horizontal dashed line, above the line you have business applications, below the line you have tech stacks. We see the catalog as sitting above the line as a business application. Now you say, okay, wait a minute, John, why? It's got technical metadata, to get all this stuff. Well, because the problem as we see it, I said earlier, having a fabric across your enterprise data estate to try to make sense out of it. So we're trying to empower all business constituencies, right? That can be very technical people. It can be deep data analysts, data scientists. It can be federated, departments that build pipelines, but they're still considered in a functional part of the business. But it can be very non-technical people. It can be people that, hey, I'm new to the operations team, and I need to understand, like, what are our key reports every month and like metrics. So it serves a very, very broad audience who find their data, can better understand their data, can reuse data. They can find and have social sort of collaboration with other people on asking questions. And so it's an accelerator, and it's a knowledge tool, essentially, a literacy tool, if you will, for that entire audience. On the business side of the ledger. Now below the dashed line are all those tech stacks, and so the catalog has integrations, and it has to, in order to feed all of what's in the landscape and bubble it up in a way that it can be made sense of for everyone, right? So
interesting. I mean, how do you get the business to adopt the use of a data catalog?
It's a great question. Yeah, $1 million question, right? Because
billion, whichever.
Yeah, right, maybe $1 billion. Who knows? Yeah, it's a great question, because we're talking a lot about governance, and we kind of pivoted to catalog, but I'm going to pivot back to governance and back to catalog. So one of the reasons is governance was not really adopted at all, right? Well, I wouldn't say at all. That's too strong. But it was really, really difficult to get any sort of adoption over the past, 10 years. And the first wave of governance was, it was this thing that was done by this other department to people, right? I'm going to come in, I'm going to police you, right? Well, does anyone like to be policed, right? No. So it was this negative connotation. In fact, a lot of organizations stopped using the word governance in their program. It just has such a negative sort of, it's perceived so negatively. But it was perceived as, I'm going to do it to you, right? I'm going to force it on you. And what we found really works. I'm going to blend back into catalog now and blend it into governance. What we found really works is, don't spend all this time trying to figure out how to police the world and then come police them. First of all, just show people on the business side, through the use of a catalog, what exists, the as-is state of the business. So everyone has reports that they have to use to drive the business. Everyone has sets of data they use to drive the business. Everyone has terminology they've got in Excel sheets, or they've got it in Word docs or Google Docs or wherever. They've all got them. Get all that stuff cataloged and allow people to just search and find it, and start having these collaborations in a social sense with their colleagues. Just empower them, give them value to the as-is state. And you can do that really fast with a catalog, right? And that's what we call a catalog-led governance. So as a governance team, you just start cataloging what exists, reflect that back to people. And now you're building up this layer of value and credits in the bank with all of your business stakeholders. Like, wow, this is really cool. For the first time, we can see all this stuff. And, I can send Sue over here to look for this report, and she can see that, Tom is the expert and ask the questions, and it empowers immediate value. Now the governance team can come in and they can layer on governance capabilities, additional classifiers, say like privacy, PII classifiers. What is private data? They can start layering on things like data quality scoring, right? To help people understand how trusted and how confident they can be. So as the governance team adds these things on incrementally, to the business side, it feels like, more value. It's getting better. It was already good. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff I can do and see and understand that I could never. And now it's just the quality of it's going up and up and up. So it's this sense of really value add as opposed to enforcement. And so coming back to your question of adoption, I think the first key to adoption is transparency. Let people see what exists and show that to them in a really easy to use, fun to use, I dare say fun interface, right? That fits them, and then layer on top of it. And you get a snowball effect. And if you do it properly with change management and your communications plan, your training plan, you get people in the outlying departments who get excited. Like they've had all this knowledge in their head for so long, and they want to not only consume, they want to put stuff in, they want to participate. So now you activate that team of people, and it's not everyone, but it's a subset. You activate them as kind of your leads in your community. And I use that word purposely because it's this notion of building a community. And that's the way you get this sort of this perpetual motion moving. And if you do it right and you stay on top of it, you got your comms plans rolling, you can get kind of a snowball effect across the entire enterprise.
I really like that approach. When I've seen, it's like any new tool, if you try to introduce it to company wide, I mean, either people embrace it, but most of the time I think they just like their workflows, kind of how it is, right? Like introducing a new tool, they're like, I'm not getting paid any extra. So
right.
now I just get to do more work. Thanks.
Right.
But I think at the same time, what you're hitting on is interesting. It's just kind of human nature. They want to share knowledge, depending on the organization.
Yeah.
Of course, some organizations are siloed, but yeah, I think you hit on something very interesting, which is that, get people have skin in the game. And then it's also interesting that you're also touching on just doing governance, but it's not so blatant. It's like doing governance without governing in some ways, or at least doing it behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, so, well-known author and thinker in the space, Bob Seiner, wrote a book, Noninvasive Data Governance, which is quite popular, right? And that hits on kind of the theme, I think, of what you were mentioning, non-invasive, right? So, and again, I think it goes back to this notion: we all just want to flip the switch and the power's there and the lights come on. And so we would like to have governance not be something that creates so much friction in the business. We just want it to happen and be there. Now that's not magic, but I think one of the elements is the community and this participation kind of concept. You need to get wisdom of the crowd, and you need to get scale. I'll just tell another story about, the old way of doing governance is, as you add data volumes and you add, data, the velocity of data change, how do we handle that, right? And the old style governance, you just add more stewards, right? Because you got to add more stewards, because stewards are the keepers of the secrets, and everything flows through the steward. So if they're going to check 15 policies against every piece of data, I guess the only way to do that, if you're adding more data, is to add more stewards. And so, I could almost mark on my calendar when, a sponsor, right, a budgetary sponsor would come to me after they started their program and say, but wait a minute, John, how am I going to do this? Like, I can't budget that many people. This isn't going to work. Like, we have other priorities too. And so that was kind of a trap. So I think the new way, the modern way of doing it is to take the mundane, rudimentary governance processes and to automate, automate as many of those as possible and tool those, and then head towards autonomy to the greatest degree. I
think John froze for a second. Hopefully it gets back on. Well, while we're waiting for him to get back online, if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat here. So just give him another minute to show up. I'll just post a picture in the meantime.
Hello, Joe. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone.
Don't
I
worry about
apologize. The internet's been a little sketchy here this morning. I had one other outage.
Speaking of automation,
right. So let me give one example of that, which will maybe make it a little more tangible. So
sure.
In the old days, let's think how to make this succinct. Okay, so in the old days, if you had a database that you were watching to know if it had some sensitive data, some private data in it, if you imagine if you change and you add a column to it, and now somebody has to know that it was added, right? So somehow, like, a steward has to be communicated with. They have to look at it. They have to sort of examine it. Maybe they profile it. Maybe they compare it against some other. It's not named exactly the same as some other fields they've marked as sensitive, but they need to cross-check that. So that's a process they go through. Now, once they've sort of discovered that and they classify it as such, and now they want to monitor the data quality of it, because that's a policy we have. We monitor quality. So they go over to a quality rule tool, some sort of tool. They set up a data quality rule to monitor this new field in this table. And they set some thresholds, and maybe they get alerts all the time if the threshold's violated. And if they get an alert, then they have to do something about it, sort of investigate it, then maybe open a ticket with another part of the service management team who's going to do root cause analysis. Maybe they need to look into some ETL. So there's a whole process there. Now, what we want to head to in terms of tooling and data governance, and by no means is anyone in the industry there yet, but I think this is the exciting part about what's happening right now. If you imagine this, you have scanners that are always scanning all of your enterprise data assets on a continual basis. And when they scan, they see that a new field's been added. That change triggers some actions. Doesn't have to be acted on by a steward. They can be kept aware, it can be logged, or they can be notified. But that change of a field can be automatically discovered against some AI rules that say, very high probability this is privacy, and this is sensitive data. It's a piece of personally identifiable information. And now, based on that, it can also trigger automatically profiling to happen. And based on the profiling and the histogram of the data that's actually there, plus other data you have from prior profiling of similar sensitive data fields, you can automatically set up quality rules with thresholds. Again, no human hands have touched this at this point. Those rules can be put into operation, can be executing now on a recurring basis. And if a threshold's violated, again, if it's of in a range that is severe enough, it can be escalated to a steward. But if it's not, if it's marginally above threshold, it can trigger an IT service request. It can, again, let the steward know, but it can and log that for audit purposes, but it can let somebody know to work on that. So there's an entire sort of flywheel or process, and there's many of these in the governance space that have been long since, very arduous, manual, nose to the grindstone type of human tasks that, we're really striving to squeeze efficiency and automation into all of these, and let the experts and the stewards work on the highest value problems, right? And streamline and have I keep going back to the analogy, flick the light switch and the power comes on, right? And that's where we're headed.
I like that. I've always advocated for, especially if you have a bunch of routine things, just automate those. and then just give me a report about what happened, right? Like I don't need a
Yeah.
report about,
Yeah.
it's too slow for one. So.
Oh yeah.
Way too
Let
slow.
me throw out another challenge for sort of the listeners. I mean, I'm sure many people that are listening, already have multi-cloud environments, right? You have some that are SaaS products you bought. They have their own, sort of inherent data stores, and you don't really know where they live, right? And then you have your own, right? You have AWS or GCP or Azure, and you maybe have all three, and data may be in different regions and zones, and some of it is in analytical databases where you deposit it there through pipelines you run, and some of it's in databases that you build applications on top of. So you have this, I call it loosely the data estate, everywhere. The challenge is, recently I've been working on the Enterprise Data Management Council's new cloud data management standard, right? And this applies to sensitive data being managed cross cloud, right? So let's take an example. So if you have somebody in France who wants to query and access the data that sits in a Azure, data store that sits, let's say, in the Western region of the US, is just allowing them to query it and pull it technically across geographic boundaries and country boundaries, violating privacy. So going back to this autonomous idea, we absolutely will not get to where we need to be in terms of compliance with all these regulations without automating the ability to understand these types of things. Is Sue, who's now requesting access to query, where does she sit? Oh, she physically sits in France. She's an employee of the French subsidiary, asking for data that sits over here. So we have to have automation go bing, 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 bing. Here's all these checks. Here's all these things. In some cases, automate approval for access and automate access with the proper tick boxes from parties saying we agree. And in some cases, it will have to hold up the process until there's a specific and explicit agreement by parties, right? So again, what I just wanted to give an example of, the complexity we already face and how that's growing exponentially, and that governance, it just will not be possible unless we automate and we make as much of this autonomous as possible.
Where do you think the role of the data catalog fits in with data ops?
If you look at Gartner's paper about data fabric, what's the base layer of data fabric? The base layer of data, they have 4 layers in the cake, and the base layer is catalog, right? So I'd encourage anyone who's got access and is a customer of Gartner's to take a look at the data fabric report. So to me, that says a lot. It may not say it all, but it says a lot. It is the foundational layer for building any sort of automation pipelines where you're going to work on data. It is the place where you want to have the ability to, at speed, discover the data, understand what's the best data. So there's a consumption side of it for data ops, but I think there's also a write back, or there's a participation. I think data ops also needs to reflect everything that's built, especially what's in production, back into the fabric, right? Because the fabric should be up to date and should reflect, as I said earlier, the as-is state of everything, and that's the business type assets, and that's very technical type assets, including the movement of data, versions of it, who's working on it, right? That sort of thing.
I guess at what stage, though, would you want to start incorporating a catalog? Is that for startups to start doing immediately, or is there a certain stage of maturity when you'd want to?
You mean as a company, maturity as a company, or size of company?
Whichever, yeah.
Look, I've worked with some of our customers. We have massive, multinationals, and we have very, very small, startups who use the product. Just reflecting back on companies I've worked for that have, been very small, you almost immediately have a data problem, right? Even if you get Salesforce and you start putting in a few custom fields in Salesforce, and then you get something like, I was going to say ServiceNow, but if you're so small, you may go to like a Zendesk or something like that. You get a Zendesk, it's got its own database. You put a few custom fields in it. You get your bunch of spreadsheets laying around. You get an accounting system. I mean, you already are in data trouble, right? And you know it, and you can't find things. You don't have to be very big at all to get into that situation. So from a cataloging, from being having analyst productivity and being productive, you almost need a catalog, from the very beginning to be the backbone or the fabric. Now, from a compliance perspective, I think you also need it pretty early. I forget what the threshold is in the UK for companies that need to apply GDPR. There is a threshold. I don't recall it right now, but it doesn't take very much. You don't have to be very big to have to comply, and so you're better off to bake it in, at least in a very simplistic way, through a catalog earlier, rather than, it's a classic pay me now, pay me later, right? The longer you let it build up and you run the risk of not complying, and then you have to either pay fines or you have to comply, right? It's going to be a bigger pill to swallow at that time.
Yeah, I guess to use the analogy we talked about earlier, it'd be like if you were like shipping stuff, your e-commerce company or something, right? And you just start shipping boxes out of your closet or something without any stock tracking at some point. As you become more successful, it's going to come back to haunt you, I think. So
yeah, right. And again, it goes back to two. I think there's two drivers. One is being compliant, and even if you're not large enough to really, you don't feel like you really comply, or you say, well, we're keeping it in spreadsheets, we're good enough. Because I've talked to lots of companies like that. Right. Small companies. Like, we're good enough. Like, we think we can defend ourselves if the regulators come after us. Okay, fine. But there's still the driver of productivity and understanding what's going on in the business, and just keeping control or awareness of all the data that exists. So it's like in the catalog, I didn't describe this before, but there's like a set of wiki pages as well that create context around all of your data and data related assets. So what a lot of our customers will do is they'll use those wiki pages to actually be landing pages for their different departments. And so like when people start up, they go through, oh, this is what the department is, and this is what it does, and this is what they use to report, and here's the data. And by the way, here's a bunch of enablement videos, right? Which help them come up to speed. So it interweaves, and explains the business process as it relates to, reports and spreadsheets they use and queries and the databases and all that stuff. It's huge productivity. I mean, for a young company, you think about having that for a new employee. I mean, at Alation, I built the professional services team from scratch, and the very first thing I did was lay out all my pages exactly the way I described. And I could bring people on in a heartbeat. I'd meet with them for like a 2-hour sort of, get to know you enablement meeting. And then I'd point them at the pages. And they were able to come up to speed, very, very fast in a matter of days.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so adding some more color to your question about what size and maturity do you need to be?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm kind of switching gears a bit. Data mesh is all the rage these days. So, at the risk of opening a can of worms, or not. What role does like a data catalog like Alation play in the data mesh?
I just wrote a blog that we posted on our community about the catalog's role in data mesh. So I think it's an interesting topic. I will say for the record, I'm not a big fan of data mesh yet. Right. I'm a big fan of data fabric, which you've all heard me mention. I'm not a big fan of data mesh yet. And I emphasize that yet, because I think we always need to advance, and I think we always need new, architectural concepts and approaches. And so it's got some really exciting things in it. I just think I see too much immaturity that if I was a CDO or I was a CIO or I was a CTO or, in a commercial enterprise, not in a vendor, I wouldn't do it yet. I would give it a couple years, right? This falls in the category of you never buy the first model year of a new run of an auto, right? You let everyone else buy it, shake out all the bugs for 3 or 5 years. and maybe you call me conservative, but anyway, so role of catalog. The catalog can play a role in the mesh the way it exists today. The mesh is largely about producing products in a highly federated way. And so when you think about what the catalog can catalog, the catalog is perfectly capable of cataloging products. And in fact, I would emphasize you must catalog products, because how else are you going to keep track of everything that's being produced as a product? The catalog is also perfectly capable of cataloging API endpoints, you know, and all the methods and all the calls for all the API endpoints. So if you want to drive just below the high level of product into actual, it can catalog all that. In fact, I'd say you must catalog it, because that needs to be interrelated with the actual data that the products, underlying data the products consume. Now you may say, well, wait, the point of a product is you're supposed to abstract that away, right? They shouldn't know the underlying data. Well, I would say you should still interconnect that, and the product should still be connected with all the great things about, you know, the business metrics it supports and the purpose that you built it, and description of the business function that produced it. And I just think, you know, product is a perfect fit for another asset type you want to catalog. I think also the governance policies and standards I've been talking about need to be articulated for the teams that are building products, right? It's pretty scary to me to think you have all these teams out there, and they're all gonna, you know, you're gonna try to get them to all sort of, you know, build stuff and put it into quote unquote production. I know there's debates about whether, you know, what level of production but anyway, so I think you need it to help educate all the teams that are working in a data mesh. I don't know how you could do it without that. So I think the data mesh builders will consume the catalog for great purpose. I think all the consumers of data mesh products will use it for a really great, valuable purpose. So yeah, I think it plays a really central role. And I think one of the last papers or articles I read on data mesh was sort of this debate about what level of sort of commonality of pipelining sort of tooling and capability needs to be shared in a consistent way across all the teams that are, you know, federated and building products. And so again, I think this is where catalog can come in and articulate those particular assets, how they're intended to be used, what the requirements are for usage, what policies they need to adhere to. So yeah, so I'm a big proponent of catalog helping the value of data mesh architecture. I still stand on my first statement. I think it's early days, and we need to see how this plays out. It feels a bit to me like, and I know there was a lot borrowed from, you know, the app dev world around, you know, Agile and Scrum, and it feels to me like applying that to data still needs to shake out in sort of the maturity.
I was going to say, I mean, the number of data teams I see functioning just individually as teams is pretty low, and so
bingo.
Right?
There's so much dysfunctionality, and that's another hang up I have. There's so much dysfunctionality with the teams that are in place, just trying to kind of do their thing. And now we're going to say, everybody get a piece of the pie, like everybody do a piece of this, and it's going to work. I'm still trying to, you know, figure that out, and I'm anxiously waiting. I hope it comes to mature fruition and all the benefits are accrued.
I mean, it's a cool idea. It
It's a
reminds
cool
me a lot
idea.
of,
It's a super cool idea.
when Jeff Bezos issued the edict at Amazon way back in the day that all teams will start communicating via APIs.
Right.
I mean, it sort of forced that mechanism. You know, and anyone doesn't, you know, I guess you're fired. Yeah. So, but to get there is a different story, right? I mean, it's one thing I think to say this is what you should do, but data, as we kind of pointed out, it is behind the app dev world in terms of maturity. It just is. And so, but yeah, I mean, you read a lot of the, I think data mesh is a killer idea in principle, but
totally agree. And we need big ideas like this.
Yeah.
Right. We need those, right? That we need some North Stars that we try to drive to, you know, for a decade, and we see where we get, because, you know, to me, it's kind of like the space program. right? Well, so how much value did we actually get out of it? Space, moon rocks, right? I mean, the final analysis, but all the accrued benefits from the space program, we all know are just absolutely massive. I mean, and it sort of feels the same way. Like we need these big ideas, we need these moonshots, because they force us to all think and push, right, in directions we probably normally wouldn't have done that.
Right. Speaking of space, by the way, William Shatner, congratulations.
Oh, did he go up today?
Yeah, he just went up this morning. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I was anxiously watching. I was like, please.
Last I saw it was delayed.
Land.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Last I saw it was delayed. So how long is it going to be up?
Oh, he only went up. It was like maybe a couple seconds. Just go
up
and down.
Okay. So low orbit.
Yeah, we're low orbit, but technically space. So that's pretty cool.
90 years old. It's impressive.
That's rad. So
yeah, that's
Captain
wild.
Kirk finally got into space. So, yeah, but and you're right though. These big ideas, I wish we'd see more of them. What's interesting to me is, especially as I go back and read a lot of older books on data, it seems like what's old is new again in a lot of ways.
Where you're older than I am, you seen a lot of that, right?
I'm sure.
You don't have to agree with me. Come on, man.
No, I mean,
I'm kidding.
Respect your opinion. No, it is interesting though. Like, my space is data engineering, and what I'm seeing right now is, data engineering is becoming very enterprisey. All the stuff that was basically reserved for large companies, with budgets is now being democratized to the point where even, very nascent startups can get going with just best practices. I think that's really cool. So, and with that too, I think you're just going to see a lot of new ideas coming out of this that
absolutely
you haven't. I mean, basically it's like if you took Informatica and just sliced it up, like you have all these new data startups that have just spun out of that. And I feel like we're just at the beginning of something different.
If if I reflect back for a minute, in my career, 30 plus years, I've always been a tinkerer, and I've always liked, to rip things apart and kind of work with APIs and try to stitch stuff back together. And, and I've always done that, in my career. But the number of people, a few decades ago that really wanted to work with APIs were like, oh, that's like C++. That's a dark art. That's for people behind behind the curtain in the, the official engineering department. And people really didn't want to. And then you had this whole wave of, client server with the GUI interface. And then you had this whole wave of self-service BI tools. And the whole point was, point and click and easy and charts and graphs. And all of a sudden in the past 10 years, it's like flip-flopped. It's like the first thing everybody does is, well, let me see your APIs. Like I want to call your APIs. Do you have a Python interface? Do you have a Python library? Do you, all of these questions about the openness. And so to me, it shows the level of, rising tide in terms of technical knowledge has grown in the younger generations. It's so much higher in their willingness to do integrations and dabble. And I don't even think this DevOps discussion, or maybe to a certain extent, this data mesh architecture idea would even have been plausible 15 years ago. I don't think you had enough people who were even interested enough to tinker,
I can
it's amazing.
I was around back then, and that would have been a discussion. It's I mean, people were barely getting cubes set up back then, let alone
right. Do you mean multidimensional cubes or physical cubes in a floor of a building?
Probably both. Yeah. For the data team, that didn't exist. So it's interesting. Well, coming up on time, for people who want to learn more about you and Alation, how would they do that?
Well, come on now. They don't want to know more about me, but for Alation, Alation.com. There's lots of great videos out there and great content. So I just invite you to go there and take a look. There's event calendar there too that, people can look at. I'm super excited. I mean, we just came out a bit of a commercial, but, we were just named as the leader on the Forrester Wave. Right, that chart they put out that shows all the dots of vendors, and so we're way up and to the right.
That's cool.
So we're super excited about that. We've been in the leader quadrant for Gartner for like 3 years, we were just named the Snowflake Data Governance Partner of the Year. Been doing a lot of heavy work with Snowflake. And we're doing some really cool work with Snowflake at the policy level, tying together these high-level governance policies I talked about earlier with the actual data masking and row-based access control level. So we're actually the first vendor, the first time I'm aware of, that's linked those two worlds, which is like a really necessary evolution.
That's huge,
in governance. Oh yeah, because it brings the what you should be doing to the tangible, what's actually happening, and what are you enforcing, right, on a daily basis. So we have lots of momentum. We have a really big customer base, really active community, a lot of great customers and leaders who I'm talking with all the time. And I mean, I think we're just super excited about what we can contribute to thought leadership in the governance space, where we're trying to help move the market. We see a ton of, I mean, what's super exciting for me, because I've seen all the horror stories of dry bones in the desert as people tried to make it across in governance, to see so many people succeeding and have these high rates of adoption and hundreds, if not thousands, of users getting value is very, very gratifying. So I would just invite anyone that's interested to come over to alation.com and check it out.
Awesome. And by the way, if you're in Salt Lake City, they just opened an office. That's where I live. So
awesome.
I think they're hiring.
I even lost track. We're growing so fast.
You're growing so fast. Yeah.
I don't know what kind of audience do you get. Some people floating in from Europe in the UK?
Yeah. Actually, quite a few. I would say probably at this time.
It's getting a little late over there.
People are showing up though. We got a big,
but we have quite a contingency now out of London and building up all the different country offices across Europe. So we're growing really fast everywhere. We have a great team over there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so anyway, we're always excited to talk to people about what their challenges are. And, we may not fit 100% of what people are looking to do. We try not to force fit it. We try to do, be rather consultative and listen to what you're trying to achieve and see if we can help, right? Pretty simple.
That's awesome. It's been fun as always. I always like chatting with you. Like I said, I feel like we can chat for hours, and
you just got to keep me on track. So next time, feel free to interrupt me.
I'd say if it's not a show and it's a free for all, we can just chat. I remember the first time we met. It felt like a podcast episode out of the gate. So I was like, we should probably
absolutely, absolutely.
If you
congratulations with the new series.
Thank you very much. The Joe and Friend Show. It's every Wednesday. Next week, by the way, we have Alex Wolford from Neo4j is going to be on talking about graph databases and everything else. Alex is a super cool guy.
Some of our customers are wanting to put Neo4j on top of us, and we've also got a couple people who are looking at using GraphQL, which is a Python graph API sort of library on top of us. So
nice.
I'll definitely listen in on that, and send me the links to your other two broadcasts on data engineering. And what's the other one?
Monday Morning Data Chat's the other one. So,
definitely.
That'd be a fun one to have you on as well.
Definitely.
My counterpart here.
Well, I just want to listen, right?
Oh, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So we're doing. We jokingly called it Observability October. So this week we had Monte Carlo on. Leo Gavish. Next week we have Andy Dang from Y Labs. And after that we have a data band on. So
excellent.
And it's great. Then on the 27th, the Joe and Friend show is also having Todd Bashane from Firebolt. He's going to be on. Talking about query latency. So a lot of great guests, a lot of cool things happening. If you haven't done so, subscribe to our YouTube, Ternary Data. Smash the like button on the videos. Subscribe to our newsletter as well. We have exclusive content that comes out every week. So you can only get it on a newsletter. So if you haven't done so, go to ternarydata.com and subscribe. Also, Matt Housley and I have writing a book, The Fundamentals of Data Engineering. The first 2 chapters are now out on O'Reilly.com for early release. It's been getting some great reviews, great feedback. That said, this is an early release book. There are some things that are going to totally suck about it. Let me know what they are. So I can't say that we've gotten even a 50% right in some cases on some of the topics. So I'd love people's candid feedback on the book. But enjoy. It seems like it's getting a ton of good reception so far. It feels like this is a book that's been needed in the world for a bit for data engineers. So anyway, shameless
Are
plug.
you're going to put the link below?
I'll just put it in the I'll put it in the chat and
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'll send you the link.
I
as well,
definitely
so
want to
you
look
can
at
check
that.
it
I mean, knowing you, I'm sure it's excellent. So I can't wait to read it. It'll be good.
Right on. Cool, man. John, as always, it's been fun. Hope to chat again.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks to all the listeners. Appreciate it. And thanks, Joe, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, man. All right. See you.
All right. Bye-bye.